All right, everybody, let's get started. Good morning. I'm Dr. DJ Hopkins. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a professor here at San Diego State University, and I'm the director of the Center for Teaching and Learning. And I'm joined by my colleague and co-host of this event, Dr. Sean Howes.
Hey, everybody. I'm the Director of Instructional Technology, sir. So welcome. Thank you. As we get started, I want to give a huge shout out to the ITS team, especially our student assistants who have joined us up here.
Yeah.
We want to thank and to CTL and Joanna Brooks for providing our lunches today. Thank you.
Well, I could go on and on with all the thanks. ITS has been a huge support in making this happen and serving as a force magnifier for the message of CTL. So thanks, Sean. It's our pleasure to welcome everyone, those of you here in the room, and those of you online in Imperial Valley, to this event, AI Year 2, What's Next for Higher Education. Before we go any further, SDSU's land acknowledgement. For millennia, the Kumeyaay people have been a part of this land. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the San Diego State community, we acknowledge this legacy. Almost exactly 1 year ago, CTL and ITS convened a conversation on our campus, less than 4 months after the release of the generative AI application ChatGPT. You may have heard of it. In the months since then, CTL and our partners ITS and the Digital Humanities Center have had numerous opportunities to host conversations in which we reflect on the many impacts of generative AI on our classes. And ITS, in collaboration with SDSU faculty, has developed a micro-credential to help our faculty prepare to meet the moment. This event is more future-facing. Our keynote speaker, who I'll introduce in just a few minutes, is going to give us an opportunity to look over the horizon at what's coming for us at the intersection of generative AI and higher education. But before I introduce our guest speaker, it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Adela de la Torre, President of San Diego State University.
Well, first of all, I want to welcome everyone, and I just want to tell you how much I appreciate your interest and diligence in AI. For those who aren't aware, we completed an amazing survey. Thanks to the team and ITS and partnership with our associated students, we had over 7,000 responses. But it's very, very clear is our students are using generative AI already. And indeed, what they're looking forward to is partnering with their faculty, with our faculty, and ensuring that the synergy and strengths of AI can move forward. So I think what's important to understand is that this is a powerful tool. And I say tool, because it isn't a replacement of the importance of our faculty and our staff in creating the environment for learning and education. So what we're hoping is to empower our faculty and our students in a way that they can move forward in their future careers. I say that because just today, James sent to me the first AI bachelor's degree will be offered by the University of Pennsylvania. It was announced today. So what you can see, whether it's the public institutions like ASU or the Ivies like University of Penn, they're all beginning to understand that our students are interested, they're engaged, but more importantly, we understand our need to prepare them for the future. The other thing that I don't want to leave from without promoting is this wonderful credential program offered through ITS, which will be this Advancing AI. It'll be a program that you can either audit for 2 hours, or if you want to get the certificate for 4, I think it takes 4 hours. I'm actually going to do it. I have the link. I haven't enrolled, but I promise James I'm going to do it this weekend. my point is that, I think it will help for many individuals who are a little afraid about how they may want to incorporate this into their curriculum. So I encourage everybody to participate. We'll be rolling this out through our global campus. It will be free, but the idea is to, take down any of the barriers that we may perceive in using a tool that could really be transformative in our teaching mission and even our research mission, and indeed even in our administrative mission. So again, thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for caring for our students with so much attention, intention, and love. So enjoy this. I know it's going to be fun, and I will now turn it over to the team. Thank you very much.
So we're going to introduce our keynote speaker, and then we're going to have two respondents, a faculty member and one of our AI student fellows will ask the first questions to kick off the Q&A. But now it's my pleasure to introduce the keynote speaker, Dr. Zach Justus. A little bio. Zach Justus is the Director of Faculty Development and a Professor of Communication Arts and Sciences at California State University, Chico. His work can be found in Argumentation and Advocacy and Communication Teacher, as well as other publications. Zach was fascinated by the intersection of teaching and learning and generative artificial intelligence right away. He has collaborated to produce several webinars, an ongoing blog series. If you haven't checked out his blog already, you really must, and a series of conference presentations. Please join me in welcoming Zach.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me out today. I really appreciate the opportunity to come share some of my thoughts with you, but I would be remiss if I didn't thank some folks individually. Sean and especially DJ have just been phenomenal in helping me navigate, made the trip incredibly easy, helped me get set up, as well as the ITS team. I think it's awesome that your president was here welcoming and showing leadership. I joke that in the CSU, there are really only two leadership qualities. One is showing up, and the other one is the courage to cancel a meeting or end it early. So I'm notorious for being on time, and I promise that I will at least end what we're doing here on time. So I wanted to start off with the questionnaire. I'm going to back up a little bit. So who had a chance to chat? I ran around and chatted at some of your tables, but I'm curious about anybody's response or the memory that you have of this first piece, about the first time that you used a piece of technology and what your reaction was, like whether it was ChatGPT or Bard or maybe something that was proprietary, maybe something that is sort of singular to your discipline. But I would love to hear from just a couple people about what your memory and experience was as we sort of look back and forward at the same. What was it like? What do you remember? Yes, in the back.
I'm a librarian, and my first experience with AI was someone looking for 5 articles that didn't really exist. They've been
Absolutely, yeah. We've our interlibrary loan service has been inundated with requests for imaginary journals. Yeah, it's been challenging for them. Who else? Yes.
I used ChatGPT to generate reports to figure out how the students would write using ChatGPT, and I was just in awe.
Yes. Yeah. Well, let's have one more. Yes, please.
I wanted to write a little blurb for our director's newsletter so I could promote my work, which is something that I'm not very good at. So the first thing that it did, I wrote it first and then I asked for it to proofread it. And it turned some acronyms like our school, JMS, into something fictitious. Spell out a name of someone. So when we are listening about hallucinations, right, it became very real in the first interaction.
Oh, those are such great examples from the range of sort of promise and peril that this technology makes available to us and our students. And I know we're experiencing it in a particular way as faculty and as staff. And Part of what I'm going to talk about today will hopefully reframe that in terms of put ourselves into the student's perspective and thinking about how they're going to experience it. Conversation I was having at the back table. I have a daughter who's 9, and as I started writing about this and reading about it and experimenting with the different technologies, it occurred to me, she'll never need to look at a blank page in her life when she sits down to write something. That might make her more productive. Something's going to get lost there. I don't know what that is yet. But for her, for people in that generation, they will experience the process of creation, whether it be text, image, code, or solving equations, protein folding, whatever it is, but they will experience those things differently and their minds will develop differently as a result. So as I said, I'm Justus, Chico State, happy to be here. My background is in communication. I teach public speaking a lot, so you'll forgive me the introductory slide, the overview of what I want to go over today, but I want to review key moments as we look back, and then as DJ and Sean asked, I'm going to take a look forward and talk about what's over the near-term horizon and what sort of things that we need to do as faculty members, as staff members, and as institutions to prepare and thrive in this new world. So rewind to 2022 and 23. It was a confusing time at the start of the year. And that is not your fault, right? Like there were basically 2 media frames, whether you were listening to technology influencers or mainstream media, there were 2 frames for generative artificial intelligence. One was Dogecoin. This is dumb. Everyone will forget about this in 6 minutes. You don't need to worry about it. It's the latest like Silicon Valley thing that they say is a big thing, but then as it turns out, nobody actually wants to use Dogecoin. There's not a use case. And then the other frame is Skynet is imminent. The AI takeover will be happening momentarily. Humanity had a good run while it lasted.
Our job is to make you look good.
Yeah, I hope you're nailing it. So those were the 2 frames, and that framed a lot of public discussion. And the problem is it framed a lot of public discussion among people who had never used any of those tools before, right? Like it was a couple months into this sort of cycle when I started watching webinars and being able to pick people out of a panel and say, that person's never opened a ChatGPT window. Right? Like, and it just became really frustrating to a lot of people who were framing this conversation were people with really limited experience in the classroom, really limited experience with the technology itself. So as far as I know, it's not Dogecoin. We're still here a year later. And also, as far as I know, the Skynet takeover is not imminent. So an abbreviated ChatGPT timeline. Obviously, there could be a million points on here, but I just wanted to highlight 3 things to put us into perspective as we sort of look back on the history of the technology as well as our institutional responses. The technology launches in November of 2022. 4 months later, ChatGPT-4 arrives. ChatGPT-4 that can pass the bar exam and virtually every advanced placement exam that we put in front of it. And then just a few months later, it's multimodal, meaning that it can produce images, it can scan and interpret images, as well as audio files. All of that happens in less than a calendar year. Normally, when we're dealing with these kind of technological disruptions, we're talking about something that spans over years or decades. We're training professionals. We have students that are mentioning it in the classroom, but they're mentioning it as something that exists, but they don't really know what to do with it yet. And then it's just a sort of interesting hypothetical conversation. But this went from something that very few of us knew about to something that could read the textbook that you're assigning to students and then summarize it and produce essays about it in less than a calendar year. All of us feel behind. So I had lots of conversations when I was walking around the room earlier, like I feel like I should have been on this from the start. I feel like, what have I missed? What are my students missing out on? Everyone feels that way. I listen to a daily podcast, the AI Breakdown by a technology sort of commentator and influencer named NLW. He's the most plugged in person I know about this technology. And virtually once on every daily podcast, he says, there's just so much going on, I just can't keep up. And I'm thinking like, that's what this dude does, right? And so if he is behind, I'm just gonna give myself and all of us permission to feel like you're gonna be behind, that's gonna be fine. So early on, my collaborator Nick Janos and I hypothesized that we would see 3 pretty predictable responses in higher education. The first one at the default camp is ignore. I'm just going to pretend like this doesn't exist. It's stupid. It's going to go away. There's going to be fight. Oh, I'm going to ChatGPT proof all of my assignments in my class. We're going to spit up a bunch of AI detection tools. I know this stuff when I see it. I've been reading, writing, and looking at code for a long time. I don't have to worry about this. And then there's the embrace. I'm going to work with students. We're going to have this amazing learning experience together, and we're going to blossom like a million flowers, right? So those were the 3 things that we thought. And Nick wrote a follow-up post because we wrote that about a calendar year ago. We pretty much nailed that. There were a couple things, though, about this that we did not foresee. One is the persistence and popularity of the ignore column. You're here, you're doing fantastic. You probably have, most of your colleagues are probably still in between column 1 and column 2, thinking that this is something that's somebody else's problem to solve, or that there's going to be a new counter technology tool that's going to pop up and we can just return to normal. I'm of the opinion that we need to adapt, and there's a difference between adaptation and adoption, right? Like, I think that we need to adapt. That doesn't mean that we all need to be in the embrace column, but I think that the ignore disposition is completely unsustainable. So that's part of what we'll talk about today. So the disruption is as real gets. And I'm not gonna, belabor you, like open up a ChatGPT window and get through some stuff, but I do want to highlight a couple things. That's not me. That is an avatar that I had created through HeyGen. It is a piece of video software. I had a trial version. We're gonna have a full-fledged version. We bought a full license to experiment with over the course of the year. But yeah, that is not me. I'm styling my hair a little bit different, but at the time, you could not tell any difference. Okay. DJ, you okay over there?
I'm okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Let me escape out of here, and I'm going to show you one thing just for a couple seconds. I like this because the theme is actually the same as what we're doing here today.
Hello and welcome. Today, I'm excited to share with you the journey of artificial intelligence, especially in the context of teaching and learning in higher education. Let's dive into how AI, particularly since the launch of ChatGPT 3, has been reshaping our educational landscape. Let's start with a groundbreaking moment.
Okay, that's enough.
That's not you.
So, yeah, no part of that is me. The script was created by ChatGPT 4. I didn't even look at it. It's just a first draft that said, chart this out. And I even threw it a little curveball. I said, not from GPT 3.5, but from 3, which goes all the way back to, I don't even think anybody used that. It was pretty much trash. But so I had it write a script. I fed the script to Gamma, which is an AI production tool. And I said, okay, make a slide deck based on this script. So that's where the slide deck came from. And then I fed the script to 11 Labs, which is a voice cloning piece of software. And it cloned my voice. I did that project in under 30 minutes, and that included signing up for 11 Labs. I sent it just really basic audio recordings of me that already existed on our university server. It was not laborious, and the whole thing cost me $1 to do that because the initial 11 Labs sign up is $1. So the disruption is as real gets. Now, I know there's insecurity and hand-wringing among professors, me included, like, oh, if this is here, like, what am I doing? What is my role? But I will tell you that, I'll talk about this later too, but your role as a professor is, I think, more important than ever. And Standing in front of a camera or in front of a group of people and reading from a script, that's the least important part of your job, right? It's the connection with students. It's the individualized feedback. It's all the other parts. Those are the hard parts. Getting back to my daughter, I could hand her a script and she could read it in front of my public speaking class. That doesn't make her a university professor. That just makes her able to read, stand in front of a group of people. But I highlight those things just to highlight the disruption is as real gets. So with that in mind, I want to highlight a couple sort of areas of growth that we need to embrace in higher education. So the first one, and this is something that was mentioned by your president, is collaboration and trust with students. There's overwhelming evidence nationally, and it sounds like here at San Diego State, that students are high volume users. But inconsistent messaging and experiences across classrooms make it difficult for students to feel comfortable collaborating. Brief story, Nick and I went and gave a presentation to students, not our students, about AI, showing them how to use some tools. And Nick and I were so excited. We're like, oh man, we're talking to professors and administrators all the time. This is going to be great. We're going to get in a room with students. We're going to ask them how they're using it. We're going to learn so much from them. It's going to inform so much of our work. None of that happened. It was a complete bust. They stared at us like we were narcs the entire time. Like the moment they said, I have a ChatGPT account, we were going to be like, university police is waiting outside to take you to the student conduct office. Don't let the door hit you on the way out, right? They were not interested in talking with us. And it's because maybe in your class, you have this open policy. You're like, hey, I just want to know what you're doing. And let's learn together. Well, the next class they go to, there is no policy. It's somebody that's pretending like it doesn't exist. And then in the third online class, it is, if you even say the word ChatGPT, I'm referring you to the student conduct office. Right? And so for a student, think about that from a student experience. Are you going to trust your professor that says, we're going to engage in radical honesty and openness, and we're going to learn in this together? Or are you going to think like, well, my other person, did they say that in this class? Like, it is impossible to navigate for students without institutional vision. We have to figure out a way to build trust, but the way that we're doing it right now with all this inconsistent messaging across different classes is tough. I still think it's possible, even in the context of one classroom with a lot of noise from the outside, but you should just know that it is going to be a challenge to build that trust to learn from your students. And then exposure and education with faculty. We asked that question at the start, what was your first experience opening something up? Because that is the most important experience. 90% of the work with faculty, and I think with students too, is just getting them to open the tool. Once you do that and you just let them go and explore, most of the work is done for you in terms of helping people understand the scale of disruption, what their class might look like in the future, what kind of tools their students have access to, and what the job placement of students might be after graduation and how those things might be adjusted. But you just got to get them to open it. I ran an intensive, what I call the retrofit workshop, where people brought their courses, that part of it was broken, to a 1-week intensive over the winter break. I did an introduction for about 5 minutes, and then I was like, here are the list of tools that you have access to. Pick one, play, I'll see you in 30 minutes. Everything after that was easy. And it's because everybody had an experience. But without that experience, it is really hard to have a productive conversation. And then you also have to connect faculty with changes outside the university. I think the principal mistake we've made in higher education is thinking that artificial intelligence has changed our classes. That's true, but it's changed our classes because it has changed the world. I have colleagues in journalism and public relations. Part of their job for years has been teaching students how to write good basic copy for products, for press releases, all those sort of pieces. That is not an in-demand skill as of right now, right? And so it doesn't mean that then those people need to find a new line of work, but it means that we need to think about a different set of skills that people are going to need working in those sectors, not just in the private sector, but in activism and in government, right? Like, all of those spaces have been disrupted. And so that means getting faculty to reach out to the recruiters who want to hire their students and ask what's going on in your workspace. And in some cases, it means asking ChatGPT or Gemini, hey, how has this field been disrupted by artificial intelligence? And then trying to triangulate those things together. But getting folks to see that the disruption isn't just in our world here, but it is in the world everywhere is a big part of the challenge. There are other pieces too. It's one of my hobby horses that I think that we need to encourage exploration. Things like, like drilling yourself on, being an expert prompt engineer. I honestly don't think that's going to be a skill that anybody cares about 2 years from now. The entire point of large language models is that you're able to input natural language and then it does something with that. It creates a web page, it creates a speech outline, it creates a line of code for a program, right? Like the entire point is to make the process of producing this stuff something that's not only available to people with elite coding skills. So the idea that then like you're going to need these 5 weird tricks to hack ChatGPT, right? Like I'm not sure if that's true now. That's not going to be true 2 years from now. So taking like static courses on large language model mastery and prompt engineering, I'm not sure how far we're going to get with that. You're probably going to get a lot further with encouraging people to play. And lastly, to emphasize the role of faculty expertise. I think that this is critically important when you're talking with other faculty, colleagues, talking to yourself. I think faculty expertise and field expertise is more relevant and more powerful now than it has ever been, because the thing that these programs do is they produce a ton of content. But sifting through that, figuring out what's good writing, what's bad, what's relevant to my field, what's not, all those sort of things, those require expertise. That part is probably not going away anytime soon. So it is critical that faculty both retain their own expertise and then equip a new generation of students to have that same expertise and discernment when looking at material themselves. I can get ChatGPT to produce great feedback, or I think it looks great, for essays about entrepreneurship. And I can tell it, I want you to cite key leading figures in the field of entrepreneurship. So it can produce that. I'm not a professor of entrepreneurship. I have no idea if those are real things or things that were made up. Now, if I ask it, produce feedback for essays about freedom of speech and Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act, I can sit down and tell you every last one of those, whether they're good or not. But that's only because I have expertise in that area. And that's where faculty and staff expertise will thrive in this era. So we have real areas of need too. We need institutional and system-wide vision about generative artificial intelligence. Lots of campuses are treating this just as a professional development problem. DJ's great. He's not going to solve this problem for the campus, right? And it's not just a technology problem too, right? Like it's not like this is a technology, so Sean's got this, I don't need to worry about it, right? Like it's an institutional level disruption. Everything that we're working with, retention, tenure and promotion of faculty, publication standards, academic integrity, assessment and accreditation that I'll talk about in a moment, right? Like all of these are fields of disruption. We need institutional vision, not a bunch of folks basically passing the buck off to their neighbor because they think like, oh, with some training about this, or oh, as new technologies come, I will get an email and then that's what all I need. And then something that your president talked about earlier, but maybe and not so quite a blunted term, agile institutions may leave legacy institutions behind in a rapidly changing era. Degrees on artificial intelligence. I think she mentioned University of Pennsylvania. University of Texas is offering a master's degree in artificial intelligence. They spun that up about 6 months after ChatGPT launched. And Arizona State is engaged in an actual partnership with OpenAI, right? So our institutions are stable and awesome. We need to figure out a way to move a little bit faster in these moments of rapid change. We don't have a decade to solve this problem, right? And figure out what it is that we're going to do and how we're going to respond. The equity issue remains one of the largest under-theorized areas of generative AI, and we need to be honest with ourselves and our students about the models, not just that they hallucinate and make stuff up, but that they are built on the corpus of human knowledge that includes all of our legacies of oppression and racism and discrimination, and that those things are baked into existing data sets. The most powerful example of this you may have heard of, this was before ChatGPT. Amazon tried to spin up an artificial intelligence program to help it with the volume of resumes that it was receiving and placements that it needed. So it basically wanted to create an HR bot to sift resumes. So they fed it all of their existing HR data. And among other things, one of the rules that the system came up with is that if the resume has the word woman in it, it goes in the trash. Women's college, women's lacrosse team, women's leadership conference, any of those things, it goes in the trash. And it learned that rule because that was the unstated rule in the company. Anybody who basically foregrounded their experience as a woman, not necessarily just was a woman, but like foregrounded that experience, didn't get promoted. So the AI machine thought, well, if these people aren't going to get promoted, we shouldn't hire them in the first place. So it became a quick way to sift through a bunch of resumes. Now, they didn't implement that. But one of the interesting things is that system basically said the quiet part out loud. And it maybe let them learn a little bit of something about the institutionalization of sexism within the company. Those kind of examples are everywhere. I can't remember the name of the book. There was an excellent book about this, actually, that predates ChatGPT, about bias being built into AI systems, but that's there. There's also promise there, right? Like Saul Kahn has talked about this a lot. The idea that we could use artificial intelligence to spin up individualized tutoring programs for students, that's one of the things that closes achievement gaps faster than anything. Now, I'm not quite as enthusiastic. I think part of that individualized tutoring is sitting across from somebody and feeling like you matter to them. But at least part of the programming curriculum part of that can be done. So what comes next? There will absolutely be more powerful and more diverse models. Getting back to the diversity part, most of my background and research is on extremist politics in the United States. So one of the first things I did when I got into ChatGPT is I was like, well, I wonder if, in addition to everything else, this combed the Stormfront archives. That's the largest Nazi blog on the internet and one of the oldest. It's a huge swath of the internet. It didn't. They put parameters around that, right? So that's, good on ChatGPT for trying to do that. If there is not already, 6 months from now, there will be like Nazi GPT that basically only combs the Stormfront archives. Right. And there's a good part of that too, not the Nazi part, but like eventually you will have custom GPTs, some of which are in development right now, that specialize in just physics or in just post-colonial studies, right? That will be more specialized and more accurate in those fields. But all those models are in development and coming. We'll see integration into our existing workflows. You may have Copilot or the Google analog that's up and running right now, but any student that's not using those tools, a couple months from now, when they open Google Doc to type a paper, up at the top, it's just going to say, what are we writing about today? Right. So even if they've made a point to not go to those websites and not engage those tools are coming to them. They don't have to go seek them anywhere. We'll see data security and insecurity. The fact that there hasn't been a large-scale data breach of one of these firms yet is, I think that's a win, not if. And I don't know what the implications of that will be. In higher ed, we'll see interest in AI start to drive enrollment trends. We'll see parallel fights over intellectual property that we're seeing play out right now with the New York Times and other institutions as people try and sort of put fences around research that they've done. The thing that I'm just about out of time, but the thing that I want to say here at the close, and I'm one of a small group of people that really care about this, but we have to see changes in assessment and accreditation. I think the most deafening silence that higher ed has experienced in the generative AI era is in the complete silence from accrediting bodies. They are supposed to be the bridge that connects us to government standards, private industry needs, and student learning. They're supposed to have a hand in all those areas and bridge that gap. But as of just 2 months ago, when I went on the WASC website, the institution that accredits Chico State, where I work, you search for artificial intelligence, there's one hit. and it was somebody whose spouse works at an AI lab, and that's in their bio. We need institutional guidance, and we also need guidance at the highest level. We need these people with their eyes on all these different populations to be able to tell us, here's what's coming next. Thanks for your time. Questions, and then the last slide? Yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Oh, thank you very much. Zach, thank you. Now, to kick off Q&A, we've got, as I said, two respondents. The first is Abir Mohammed. Abir is one of two AI student fellows, and she's a major in management information systems and Africana studies.
Abir, can you come up to the front so that
Hello, my name is Abir Mohammed, and I'm an AI student fellow. This position was offered to me by James and Sean because I just happened to stumble upon one of these TTL meetings. And CJ was kind enough to continue to invite me to them. So I think my initiative in coming to these meetings and the staggering participation we had with students taking the AI student survey really shows how students are really interested in AI and how it's possibly going to change how they receive their education. So my question was, how can we foster more collaborative efforts between teachers and students in enforcing policies around AI usage in the classroom?
Great. Thank you so much. What a great question. So I love that question. I think as you might have gathered, I think that's probably one of the areas where we have the most work to do. And it is, I don't think the solution to that is flashy, right? Like that's not a new Discord channel that you open up for your class or something like that, right? Like it is the hard, intensive human work of building trust over time. And that's sometimes tough because our experience with students comes in these like discrete little buckets. You know, you get a couple months with a student to try and build relationships. And some of us struggle to just remember names, let alone like build meaningful personal relationships over time. But I think without that trust with students so that they can say, hey, I found this, what do you think about that? Without the fear of thinking that you're going to say, that's awful, why would you do that? I thought you were here to learn. Or why are you cheating and telling me about it? A syllabus policy is great, right? And that's a good starting point. But a student has to feel that connection and trust with you if you want to share with them and have that reciprocated. And there's no substitute for the personal experience of sitting with them, and being open with them. The first step to that is being open with your students about what you're worried about and how maybe you are using the technology, right? In the intensive, one of our faculty members, she came in kind of reluctant, but by the time she left, she was having ChatGPT revise her syllabus to make it more accessible and inviting to students, which I thought was an awesome usage. But then she was like, oh, well, I guess I now also need to put in my syllabus and announce to my class, like, I use this tool. And she was having a little bit of a hard time with that. But for me, where I was sitting, I was like, that's the first step. And then maybe a month from now, maybe 2 months from now, you're having a student like Abir that's then telling you, this is what I'm worried about. This is what I'm excited about. How can we make this work together? So thank you so much for your question.
Our next respondent is Dr. Lisa Kapp, who is a professor here at San Diego State's Department of Psychology.
Everybody. Thank you for a great presentation. It was really thought-provoking. One of the things that I think I've been thinking about is we are all, I think still, I'll speak for myself, exhausted from the pandemic and all the changes that we had to make from there. And now we have all of this to think about, which is exciting, but also exhausting. So what have you guys discussed with regards to AI and the impact on workload, both for teaching, which is a lot of what we're centered on here, but also on research, where there may be more pressure to just produce more and more and more?
Thank you so much, Lisa. So I can't take credit for this insight. This is my colleague Nick that pointed this out, that in some ways, generative AI came to higher ed at perhaps the worst possible time, because so many of us were staggering and exhausted like a boxer late in rounds of a fight. The politicization of higher education that has been going on for a long time, but really was super, I mean, it seems like ancient history now, but I'm sure you can remember the cancel culture panic and like Milo Yiannopoulos at Berkeley and all those pieces, but like this deep political divide about higher education that seemed to imperil institutions as a whole, defunding certain institutions across the nation. And then the pandemic, now we're all competing in online space and teaching online whether we want to or not, exacerbating enrollment crises at a variety of institutions. Coming out of the pandemic, how many of you said to yourselves or heard colleagues say, I can't wait to get back to normal? I remember the first time I stepped in front of a physical class again, I was just like, this is magic. And I'm so happy we're doing the thing again, my favorite thing, let's go. But like just when we were starting to recover, this came, and it just came at this moment of maximum insecurity for those of us in higher education. So if you feel exhausted and overwhelmed, there are lots of good reasons for that. Now, in terms of navigating that pressure, one of the things that I think it's important to realize ourselves and to talk and show other faculty are some of the ways that these tools can make your life a little bit easier. And we started to pivot less towards a show and tell workshop at Chico State and more towards let's talk about how you can use this as a tool. You know, that annoying thing that you do where you have a course calendar and then that was from fall and now it's in spring. And so now you have to go in and change all the dates and remember when the holidays are and those sort of thing, right? Like a program can do that for you, or you can have it write a script that will do that for you, even if you don't know how to code. We were talking at this table about writing letters of recommendation. That is no one's favorite task. AI is really good at it. The letters end up better, and your voice is still there because you're giving it the parameters, you're reviewing it after the fact, you're going in to edit. It's, most of us have a bank of these things, like of letters of rec that we have written over years, and we're like copying and pasting different sections, and then you send it off and you realize like, oh, this person's applying to Riverside, they're not applying to Berkeley, and I send it in and it said Riverside. And so like the truth is like we're already doing that work of blocking it together, but right now it's labor intensive for you, but there's a way that it gets a lot less labor intensive. I'm not sure what the publication standards and expectations are going to look like 5 years from now. And I think that's something that is going to be, I don't think there's a one size fits all for that. I think that the standards in College of Business are going to need to look different than they are in a Department of Fine Arts, in terms of, you know, what sort of products you're producing, the acceptability of using artificial intelligence for some tasks as opposed to others. I certainly don't pretend to be an expert in all disciplines, and I think that that is probably going to be a very local solution rather than a global one, but it is a conversation that we have to engage in. And it's not a conversation we have to engage in because like that's in the future, right? Like that's now. I submitted something for publication a couple of months ago, and I used AI to redo the reference page because I hate doing reference pages, and I never was one of those people that got on board Zotero. That's the thing that like my grad students keep telling me to use. I didn't do that, so I just like dumped all the URLs into ChatGPT, and I was like, make this MLA. I don't want to. And you know what? It did a pretty good job, but I didn't tell the editor that, right? Like, do they care whether I formatted the reference page? I hope not. If they do, they're really focused on the wrong thing. But like, we have to start engaging in those conversations, not because that's the future, but because that's the present.
Yeah, so thank you, Zach. Seriously, amazing. We'll have about another 15, 20 minutes for Q&A from you all, and hopefully Zach will be able to continue to answer our questions. So yeah, I want to open it up now for Q&A. I know we have colleagues joining us online, so maybe Ty, you can help monitor the chat and yeah, questions for Zach.
Guess I'm supposed to come up so I can be on camera?
No, actually, the Zoom is
Okay.
doing a very good job of picking it up. Hopefully, we can see it in the transcript. So yeah.
I have two, but I'm just gonna ask one in the interest of not hogging. So you suggested that GPTs are biased. I would say that GPTs are not biased, they reveal bias.
Okay.
And regardless of where the bias and toxicity is coming from, I think that this is something that we need to address. And I'd like to get your thoughts on how to ensure that our students are being critical consumers of the content that's being produced.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction, probably a better phrasing than I had about the revelation of bias. That's certainly the case in the Amazon example that I use.
My friend saying,
Perpetuate, I like that.
because, I put in ChatGPT today, create a agenda for new faculty orientation, and it did not have the DEI training that's so important.
Okay.
Is it pretty?
Yeah.
The first draft.
Perpetuate.
Yeah, and there are endless examples of this, right? Like there was a popular one that floated around on some LinkedIn accounts that I follow, asking like, produce image of a Black doctor helping a white child, and it just couldn't process that, so it just kept reproducing the opposite, where there was a white doctor and frequently a Black and sort of in a stereotypical in terms of the setting African child. Right, like it just couldn't get out of that frame because that was the training data that it had. So whether we want to say replicate, reveal, in some cases, I think supercharge that sort of bias, that is a reality. Like I said, I think it's one of the more under theorized areas of artificial intelligence in higher education. I think the work of getting students to be critical consumers of information, not just of artificial intelligence, but also more broadly in terms of a lot of the trash that they encounter in their lives, is an incredibly difficult task. And I'm actually going to complicate it further. You all have disciplinary and professional expertise because you have a lifetime of doing what you're doing. Right? Like I'm really good at reading stuff about freedom of speech because I've been teaching freedom of speech for like 13 years. I've read God knows how many law reviews, all that sort of stuff, right? So that is what has built that expertise in me and in understanding how students are writing about freedom of speech. I don't know how to build that capacity the same way in this environment where a student that's in graduate school or needing to write a paper then has a sort of ready assist from something else. Now, information literacy is probably more important than ever. It's, a hallucinated article or identifying bias that maybe is replicated with an artificial intelligence program. I think that a sort of return to fundamentals, and this is, I'm of the opinion that that is not a, do you all have a University 101 class here? What is it? Does everybody take it? But not all, but it's not for transfer students.
Not yet.
Okay. One unit? Okay. Yeah. So I think, the stereotypical thing that we do in higher ed is we're like, oh, we want students to learn how to use the library, know what the reliable source is. We're going to put it in the 101 class. I'm of the opinion that with the proliferation of this, that then becomes that's a unit of everything class, right? Because you can teach students in a 101 class, here are the library databases, here's how you make sure that something's peer reviewed, that sort of stuff. But then when you get to starting to get into the specific fields of what it is that you're studying, what it is that you're teaching people about, whether it is chemistry or entrepreneurship, right? Like there are going to be different things that students need to be looking for in those contexts that aren't going to be in a University 101 class. So that's one of those areas where we have frequently sort of outsourced that work to one particular class or one particular unit. Oh, librarians do that. Oh, that's in University 101. I think that that's one of those pieces where that is much more everyone's job than just one class and one group of people. And that's, I'm sorry, that's probably a really unpopular answer. I'm sure you don't want another thing to do with students in your class. But I do think that's the reality of where we're at. Yeah.
Just piggyback on Joanna's comment here. So now it's not only AI stuff, but AI learns, right? That
Right.
component sort of missing here, I think. They learn very quickly. So I don't think we are far away from a day where they can pull DEI stuff better than anybody. So how do you address that? How do you respond to that question?
Yeah, I think that gets back to one of the sort of future looking pieces where I think that we are going to see a proliferation of more specialized models, right? Like you already see that right now, like the AI generative program that's embedded in formerly Twitter, now X, called Grok. Like that is purposefully meant to be off-putting, not politically correct. I don't even know if people say that anymore, but like it's purposely meant to be provocative and funny, to make fun of the user, right? Like that is built into the system. So I've no doubt that like you're absolutely right that there will, maybe the CSU rolls out a custom GPT, and then maybe we are able to build in some of our collective DEI commitments. And then, maybe a state with a different political orientation rolls out theirs, and you will not see the word diversity in any responses, right? But that is what we are on the cusp of, is the proliferation of these specialized models. OpenAI is itself courting that, right? Like, I'm not sure if y'all played around with custom GPTs. I've had mixed results trying to get those pieces to work, but like, you build on that powerful infrastructure, and then you give it a specific set of instructions and documents and say, these are what I want you to make primary in your responses, right? Like, I think the writing is on the wall that is the world that we are headed toward, where you can basically go to a different website and, you, like I said, whether it exists right now or not, something that is an explicitly white supremacist version of ChatGPT, right? Like that either exists or it's around the corner. And on the flip side of that, like you can get something that is as progressive and inclusive as probably you want it to be. And I do think that that's another piece that will further complicate the sort of eye tests that some of us have for language and essays that are generated with artificial intelligence, because I know what Grok is. I've never used it, right? Like I'm okay at recognizing some of the syntax patterns in ChatGPT and Bard, but like I've never used Claude, never used Grok. I've never used a bunch of these other things. So like as soon as it's like choosing one of these more diverse models or customizing one of their own, zero chance that I or anybody else is going to recognize that. Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. I would like to hear a little bit more about concerns with data security and when these generative tools are going to be hacked, and what happens after that. Does that mean that all of a sudden it's going to be out who was using it and who wasn't, and where the AI police is going to come for those that were using it and then disclose it, or what's going to happen at that point?
Yeah, that is, what's your name?
Miranda,
that is such an excellent question. Like I said, you can count me surprised that there's not been a front page story about a security breach to date. And I think that is a when, not if question. So the first thing that I want to address is that like there are very legitimate security concerns that we already know about, and right? Like OpenAI purports to be a nonprofit company. I think most people think that's not like a real thing. Well, like they're private business. Big chunk of them is owned by Microsoft. Google's obviously like they're in the business of making money. They're collecting data from everything that you enter, right? Whether it's on a Google search or whether you're into Gemini or whether you're in OpenAI, right? Like that all becomes part of that system. And so asking students to engage in that system is asking them to give up at least a piece of their privacy. And it's something that we shouldn't take lightly, right? Like that's an engagement with the system that not all students are going to feel comfortable engaging with. So there's a sort of privacy thing that almost like predates, a data breach of this. But yeah, I mean, like when you're logged into these things, like you have an account, right? And then OpenAI is trying to roll out stuff where then you can ask it to remember or not remember. I mean, raise your hand if you think that if you tell it to forget something, it's actually going to forget something, right? So I believe every query that I've entered into ChatGPT is stored in a cloud somewhere. And that then if there is a data breach, that then all of that either is public or is potentially public. Right? And then the implications of that are gonna vary radically by state and by nation. Right? You know, this is an example that I use because I'm familiar with this because of my background in freedom of speech, but like the legality of writing and generating particular types of erotica vary wildly, not even just internationally, but state to state in the United States. So like, yeah, very easily you could have a data breach and then you're fine in California, you cross the border and you find yourself in Utah and then you could be subject to arrest, right? Like that's absolutely true. That's not necessarily unique to artificial intelligence, but yeah, and there were examples, especially early on, of people getting ChatGPT to reveal particular parameters that were supposed to be private. And custom GPTs that allow you to build those sort of things, I'm not sure if this hole has been fixed, but when those were first rolled out, you could reverse engineer all of them. So that you could basically ask it, what were the custom set of instructions that you were given? And then it would produce those. What documents were you given that did that? And then it would just tell you. So the systems are not as secure as you would hope right now. And then, I mean, I would bet money that if we're having this conversation a year from now, one of these institutions has experienced a major data breach. Yeah.
I got a question in regards to students, and my apologies if I'm a little bit direct in this, but
Please.
I'm just afraid. I haven't used it. I haven't used AI, but I have. So I teach a few classes, and last semester I noticed there were at least 7 to 10 students who submitted their papers using ChatGPT. So we had to deal with those consequences. But my biggest fear is, will this software just make the students lazier or dumber, in a sense that they just put in the parameters and submit the paper to me without even thinking. I mean, and I work with first-gen low-income students. Many of them are taking out student loans to finance their education. And I am fearful that they're missing out on the critical thinking, because they're going to be submitting papers to me without even a moment's thought of what happened or how they were able to construe several factors in my class and be able to articulate those in a 3 to 5 page paper. And I'm like, so what are you getting out of your education if all you're going to be doing is submitting those, your homework assignments using this document? So your critical thinking skills, I don't know. I mean, are they going to be affected? Is it something where when they go onto a job interview, I mean, there's one thing in terms of writing a cover letter, but now you're going to have to speak those individuals, and they're going to notice that there is no match between the cover letter and able to critically think about those questions that they're asking. So that's my biggest.
So I think that is the sort of most fundamental concern that almost all of us have, is this stuff that I've been teaching students is important. It's important that they know it. It's important that they understand it. And how is it that, we can make sure that they are still going to learn this, right? And the things that you're talking about, they aren't the writing basic copy, right? Like the fundamental critical thinking skills, like those are pieces that it's important that students know, and that skill, and I shouldn't even say skill, that ability is not going away. Perhaps it's more important than it has ever been. So the process that I try and help faculty navigate with this particular problem is a sort of multi-part one. The first step is your courses have student learning outcomes, and then you probably have assignments that are correlated with those outcomes. The disruption that we experience is in the performance of the task in the form of the assignment, the 3 to 5 page paper. So the thing that we have to back up to, and this is not an elegant process and it is labor intensive. The thing you have to back up to is you start with student learning outcomes and you say, what here is changed, what here is the same, right? And that gets to the thing that I talked about earlier, contacting people that are hiring students, talking to people who are teaching the classes that come next in a sequence of which your class is perhaps the first. So you figure out are these things that I'm teaching, are these sort of goals that I have for my students, are these the same or do they need to change? And that's the first piece. For some things, those are going to change, right? And it's hard because we've perhaps become wedded to sort of identified with those things. For some things like developing critical thinking skills, like that's still important. But the way that I got students to develop those and the way that I sort of learned to assess those things have to change because the thing that I was doing is broken. It doesn't work anymore. In the intensive that I just ran, I saw a lot of faculty sort of like take a step sort of backwards in time almost and start to talk about different modes of getting people to engage with content that weren't a manifestation of a paper or a take-home exam, but were a manifestation of a presentation, a group project. Maybe students previously gave a 5-minute presentation. Now you give a 1-minute presentation and there's 4 minutes of question and answer, right? And those are all inelegant solutions that sort of like undercut the efficiency and the face time that a lot of us have like struggled to build into our classes over the last 20 years. And they aren't a solution for all problems. If your class is online and asynchronous, none of that stuff works, right? Like it's a whole different set of parameters. But yeah, I think we have to back up and think about why are we doing what we're doing? And then if those things are still important in the same way, then we have to rethink the tasks that we are asking students to do that either help them build that capacity or help us assess whether or not they have built that capacity.
I guess it's just that my biggest fear is that the more people are dependent on that.
Yeah.
There's going to be a significant drop off.
So I will, can I do 2 quick anecdotes about that? Thank you so much. One positive, one negative. Positive one, in terms of productivity in the workplace, there have been several peer-reviewed studies when you're introducing a custom GPT to a large environment. Let's say they're trying to solve tech or customer service problems. The thing that it does is it helps new employees and employees that are struggling immediately rise to the level of high-performing employees. So that's not critical thinking, that's productivity. Sometimes those things are together, sometimes they're not. But we do know that like there are ways that these tools supercharge the learning and capabilities of people that are new and don't have as much capacity. On the flip side of that, I also heard a story from one person that was in the intensive. She works in communication sciences and disorders. She trained speech pathologists, and she was talking to one of her practitioners on the field that hires some of their graduates. And they had a recent person that they hired, and that person, while they graduated before ChatGPT existed, has become completely reliant and does not write up a single client report and prognosis and treatment plan herself, and seems to have forgotten all of the pieces that she learned while she was actually in school. So I think these are early days, but we're seeing radically divergent paths in terms of how these tools affect our ongoing capabilities and those of our students.
So unfortunately, that is all the time we have for questions, but Zach, one more time. Such a timely conversation, and there's so many things that we're going through as we address these challenges here at SDSU. Your mention, Zach, of kind of the ignore versus police, embrace, etc. I think that's one of our goals, is to kind of move from the ignore category. Not saying that everyone has to embrace, but certainly address, right? And one of the themes that we'll be talking about more as we unveil some of the student data from that big survey with nearly 8,000 students that President Adela Torre mentioned, is this kind of confusion, disorientation, discombobulation that the students are feeling. So really timely with that. One other thing that stood out is the accreditation piece, and I'm happy to share that Dr. Frazee and Dr. Sobo and Goldberg, a couple of our faculty fellows who are not able to be here today, they've been accepted to share our research and some of our approaches at the WASP Accreditation Resource Conference that's coming up in April here in San Diego. So that will hopefully plant the seed with people that do these accreditations and others that are going through the process as we will be over the next couple of years. One last resource that we want to leave you with is this micro-credential. Who's enrolled already in the AAAI micro-credential? All right, it's a good company here. It's you all and about 600, nearly 600 faculty from across campus. So these are the areas that we're looking at, all the way from the overview to certainly ethics and responsible use, prioritizing that. What can AI do? So both on the what can it do, what can't it do, as well in terms of limitations. Available apps today, which Zach, to your point, this is a moving target, and things are coming out every minute of every day, and prompt engineering activities, and actually applying that to things like syllabi, et cetera. So definitely enroll in that. Share this link with your colleagues, maybe colleagues that are more in the ignore column, right? That need some more information. And let's see, I think that is all. DJ, what else, anything else? Any other words that we want to leave the group here with?
I just want to say thank you so much, Zach, Sean, and the whole team at ITS staff, Antonio, and the ITS student workers for making this event possible. Thanks, everybody.
Zach, if people want to get in touch with you,
Yeah, I'm terrible about that. Yeah.
we will share Zach's info. There is a class in here at 1, but as long as we're out by then, it's all good. Thanks, everybody.